The Italian opening with 3, bishop c4. This is the opening that Fabiano Caruana used versus Gukesh D in their ultimate classical match in the 2025 Norway Chess Tournament. This is their round 10 match, and this game was insane. Going back to the very beginning here, Fabiano Caruana opens 1e4, best by test, and Gukesh goes e5. That's pretty much all the top players play these days in classical chess. Now we have knight f3, knight c6, and Fabiano plays quite a bit of both the Italian and the Ruy Lopez, and in this game he does go for the Italian with 3, bishop c4. This opening is just insanely popular at all levels of play these days. All right, from here, black, knight to f6 is the move, pressuring the pawn on the e4 square. Then we have d3 defending, and here Gukesh plays the first big surprise of the game. The main move here, by far for black, is bishop c5, although I do have to say, nowadays, tons of black players, and I mean tons of black players, including Magnus, including Hikaru, they're all playing this move bishop e7, which I personally don't quite get yet, but it is all the rage right now. Instead, Gukesh, he plays this move h6. Now, this move, it can be tied with a number of different ideas. You can go g5, you can go g6, you can go bishop e7, you can go bishop c5. Basically, everything is playable here. We'll have to wait and see. All right, Fabiano, he plays the first big surprise of the game for white. He plays this move a3. Now, this move right here, it's not the strongest move at all. What is the idea? Well, technically, you're defending your bishop on c4. If black ever goes knight a5, you can go back to the a2 square. So that is kind of the idea here. You're just giving your bishop that retreat square. However, a3 is not the most ambitious move in the world. If you want to save the bishop, something like a4 or c3 is a little more ambitious. So Fabiano trying to play a little bit of a surprise in response to black's surprise here with the move h6. Now, Gukesh, how does he want to follow up? Again, g6, g5, bishop e7, bishop c5, and d6 are all playable here. In the game, Gukesh goes g6. Again, another surprise. He's intending to fianchetto his bishop on g7, but this plan is a little bit slow, and it kind of gives white a free hand to do whatever he wants in the center. All right, Fabiano, he continues, knight to c3. This move, knight c3, is very common in conjunction with a3, both in the Italian opening and in certain lines of the Ruy Lopez opening, in particular, the 6d3 anti-Marshall line. All right, now, black, bishop g7 is the move. We have h3, guarding g4 preemptively, and then d6. Now, white, bishop to e3. Again, these moves, knight c3 and bishop e3 and h3, are all very common in conjunction with the move a3 here. Now, black goes a6, potentially intending b5. We'll have to wait and see. And now queen d2 for Fabiano, pressuring h6. And of course, the benefit of this move, black now cannot castle. If he castles right away, then bang, the pawn on h6 falls as the rook is no longer defending that square. So, Gukesh, he's in a little bit of a bind. He can't castle, so what is he going to do? Well, here he goes bishop e6, a typical move in the Italian opening, challenging this bishop on c4. And if white does nothing, or if he, say, castles kingside or queenside or kingside, then black can take on c4, damaging white's pawn structure. Now, that isn't the end of the world for white, but it's also not the most fun position to play unless you're literally a top 10 GM. All right, here, according to the engine, actually the strongest move for white is long castles, letting black take on c4. That's a very gutsy move. Instead, Fabiano plays a simpler option. He takes on e6 like this. Bishop takes e6, black takes back, and then we have this move, knight to e2. Now, this move right here is played with the intention of going knight to g3. And typically, this knight on c3 is better placed on g3 in both the Ruy Lopez and the Italian openings. And the reason being, it frees up your c-pawn to march into the game. From there, you can go c3 and d4, fighting for control of the center of the board. Now, here, Gukesh, he knows this, and he decides to lash out on the king side with the move g5. This is a very aggressive, very committal move. Of course, the pawns cannot go backward, and in the future, white's going to be able to go h4, trying to attack this pawn on g5. So, black gains space and potentially starts the attack with g4, but he also makes some weaknesses on the king side, which means black may actually be intending castling long with, say, queen d7 and long castles. We'll have to wait and see. All right, Fabiano, he continues with his plan. Knight to g3 is the move, transferring the knight over to the king side like this, and now black goes queen d7. From here, Fabiano, c3 is the move, intending d4. Again, he's staying consistent. Knight e2, knight g3, c3, all these moves make sense. And now Gukesh, long castles, and this is where the board gets set on fire. We basically have an opposite sides castling scenario, black castling on the queen side, and white's king, it's going to be stuck on e1, or it's going to castle king side, one of the two. It's certainly not going to castle queen side. This move c3 is just too weakening, and white would have a ton of issues if he ever did that. And here Fabiano, he starts the attack immediately on the queen side here with the move b4. Now, white's idea is potentially something like a4 and then b5, trying to push back this knight and trying to attack the hook on the a6 square. In response, Gukesh, he plays the move d5, counterattacking in the center. Now, this move d5 is very commonly played for black when he moves bishop to e6 and white takes and black takes back with the f-pawn. So d5, this pawn is now supported by the doubled e-pawn, and if white takes on e5 like this, black takes back like that, and black will have an amazing pawn structure in the center. For that reason, white here, he really doesn't want to take on d5. That would be a massive weakening move. So in response, and by the way, the threat now is simply d4, trapping this bishop. So white here, he has to respond to this threat, and you basically have to move the queen. You can move to, say, d1 or c2 or e2. Whatever you do, you have to move the queen right here. So in the game, Fabiano, queen to e2 is the move, a good move. And in response, Gukesh, he plays the most aggressive move possible in this position. He pushes forward with the d-pawn to d4. d4 is the move. Now, this might be a little bit premature, but Gukesh, you know, this guy knows what he's doing. All right, we have c takes d4, then e takes Gukesh. He's gotten rid of his double pawn. Now he has a very strong pawn on d4. However, later in the game, that pawn may be a target. Fabiano, bishop d2 is the move. And the plans are still basically the same. White is going to attack on the queen side, potentially with a4 and then b5. And black on the king side, potentially with g4 or h5, then g4. All right, Gukesh here. Queen to e7 is the move. He slides the queen over and defends d4 with the rook. And now we have rook b1. A logical move. Again, white's main idea here is b5, attacking the knight and the hook on a6. Therefore, rook b1 makes a lot of sense. Now, Gukesh, the move is knight to d7. Okay, this is a somewhat sophisticated move. Black may be intending knight d to e5, trying to trade off this weakened knight. He also defends d4 with the bishop. And the knight's also a little bit closer to the defense of the queen side if it needs to be there later in the game. Now we have castles, then knight d to e5, and now here, Fabiano, he goes knight to h5, a very strong move, attacking the weak bishop on g7. Now, for right now, this bishop is technically a bad bishop. Black technically has the pawn on d4 and on h6. It's technically not doing a whole lot right now. However, if he were to lose this bishop, that would be a massive loss, as then white's dark squared bishop here would become a monster, both in the middle game and the end game, if the game reaches that stage of the game. Now here, Gukesh, he trades on f3. Knight takes f3, queen takes, and then he goes bishop to e5. So he clears the e5 square for the bishop, then jumps in like this. Now here, Fabiano, he decides it is time to attack immediately on the queen side. According to Stockfish, the best move here is perhaps rook f to c1, but instead he goes b5 right away, going for the attack. Now black takes on b5 like this, white takes back, and then we have queen takes a3. So Fabiano here, playing b5 immediately, knowing the pawn on a3 will be sacrificed, and he's okay with that because he wants open lines to attack on the queen side as soon as possible. So black takes, white takes back, and then queen takes a3. And now, of course, Fabiano, he's down this pawn, and this pawn is weak. But in return, he now has the open a file to pressure black, and that could be a very important detail as the game progresses. All right, Fabiano, rook to c1 is the move, lining up the rook on the c-file with both the king, the pawn on c7, the knight, the pawn on c7, and the king on c8. And very importantly, Fabiano, he potentially has the idea of the rook sacrifice on c6, or the exchange sack, whatever you want to call it, Chess YouTube, taking on c6 with the intention of damaging black's pawn structure and removing a key defender of the king side here, that being this knight on c6. All right, in response, Gukesh, rook h to f8, attacks the queen on f3. There's no time for the rook sack yet. The queen, it drops back to e2. And now Gukesh, bishop d6. A centralizing move, maybe intending e5, and the bishop is a little bit closer to the queen side where it can defend a little bit easier. Now, here, Fabiano, he finds a series of very strong moves. e5 drives back the bishop. Of course, the pawn is supported by the rook and the queen. So, if black takes here, white just takes back with the rook, and overall, losing the pawn and the rook is a small concession to win these two minor pieces. So with that in mind, Gukesh, he does not take here. Instead, he plays a very strong defensive idea. Rook to f5. What is the idea? Well, first of all, you pressure this pawn that much more with 3 pieces. And secondly, if you take on d6, the rook on b5 falls in response. So black here is meeting this aggressive move with this rook move, which pins the pawn on e5 to the rook on b5. So what does Fabiano do in response? This is a good time for a puzzle. If you like puzzles, pause video right now and try to find the brilliant idea by Fabiano right here. It is a showstopper move. And of course, we're talking about the rook sack. Rook takes c6, giving up the rook. A brilliant move. What is the idea? Well, first of all, you remove this key defender of the queen side here. If black takes back, then the b files open up. And beyond that, this pawn on e5 is now defended sufficiently. Fabiano going all in for the attack. All right, black takes on c6. That is effectively the only move. If you don't take the rook, you're just down a piece. So, black takes, and then rook to a5. The rook and the bishop synergizing to hit the queen, and now white dominates the open a file. All right, black, queen to b2. The queen drops down. Then we have e takes d6. White wins back 1 piece here. And of course here, there is this tension with the rooks here. So black can take on a5, but white's always got the resource. Bishop takes a5, winning back that piece. And here black does take on a5. We have rook takes. And now before taking on a5, Fabiano, he inserts the very strong check on the e6 square. So he takes on e6, the king slides over, and then bishop takes a5. So let's slow down and talk material here. Temporarily, white is up the equivalent of 1 pawn. He has the 2 minor pieces versus the rook, and both sides have the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pawns. 5 pawns apiece. Of course, this pawn will fall. Black takes it, and now material is technically even. White has the 2 minor pieces versus the rook and the extra pawn for black. Now we have queen to e7. The queen slides up. Queen a1 hits the king. Bishop e1 blocks the attack. Fabiano does not like the idea of going to h2 here because then you lose the bishop. So bishop e1 or the alternative, queen to e1 are the only ways to save this piece on a5. So bishop e1 played in the game. Now, this bishop is pinned to the king. That is not a good thing. And of course, the queen is tied to the defense of the bishop. If the queen goes somewhere else, for example, I don't know, to e8, or not e8, f8 here, bang, you lose the bishops. Fabiano, he's got to be careful. All right, black, c5 is the move, gaining space, giving the king potentially a square on c6, and also supporting d4 a little bit more. However, this move turns out to be a little bit dubious. Instead, the right way forward for black was actually queen to a2, giving the queen access to all of these squares right here. Instead, c5 played in the game. Then we have knight g3. The knight drops back, and then rook to c6. Now, king h2, queen to a2. Black potentially intending, say, queen to e6. Now we have knight to e4, and then queen to d5. Now, f3 is the move. Fabiano finding actually a pretty good little square for this knight. As you all know, knights need centralized outposts to operate at their full potential, and Fabiano certainly found that in this position. And beyond that, the bishop's also quite active and go to, say, g3, attacking c7, where it does defend the king side a little bit. So Fabiano finding a really nice way to coordinate his pieces. And beyond that, white can also go knight d2 to c4 later in the game. c4 would also be a really good outpost. All right, Gukesh here. He knows this, and he goes c4 right away. First of all, trying to seize control of this outpost and also trying to mobilize his queenside pawn majority. Of course, he's got the 3 versus 1 majority on the queen side. He's got to push those pawns ASAP to get the attack going. All right, queen b4 hits the king. King to c8. Now queen to a4. The queen slides over. We have king to b7. Bishop f2. C takes d3. Bishop takes d4. And then rook to a6 hits the queen. From here, queen b4. The queen slides over as well, hits the king, and forces it back. Black goes king to c8. Of course, you can't block the attack with, say, rook to b6, as then you drop the rook immediately. All right, black, king c8 is the move. The king slides back. Then we have queen to f8, sliding back to the back rank, hitting the king on the c8 square. Now here, Gukesh, he has the option of going, say, to b7, offering the repetition of moves. Instead of that, he goes queen to d8, sliding back like this. Now we have queen c5, the queen slides back again, rook to e6, the rook slides over, queen to c4, and then rook to d6, threatening the weak bishop on the d6 square. Now we have bishop to e5, rook to d5, the rook slides down. And here, this is an absolutely critical point in this game. Fabiano Caruana, he has the lead. He has these very strong minor pieces that are very strong. They're synergizing well. They're both very active, pressuring c7. The knight controls all of these critical squares. It can jump in. And beyond that, white has the attack on the black king. Yes, black has the strong pawn on d2, but for right now, it is under control. And Fabiano, the best way to continue the attack, you know what? This is a good time for a puzzle. If you like puzzles, pause this video right now and try to figure out the best way for white to continue this attack right here. Turns out the best move for white is going to be queen to a6. Here's how it goes. Queen to a6. You force the king over like this. From there, you drop back this bishop, giving it access to squares like f2 and so on, and white's attack continues. Instead of all that, white goes f4 here. Now, this is a very gutsy move. What is the idea? Well, I guess he's trying to support the bishop, keep it on e5, and also pressure g5. But here, Gukesh finds the right response. He's got 15 seconds left. This is basically a gut instinct, intuitive move. He goes d2. That pass pawn, it must be pushed. Strong move. Now, Fabiano, bishop takes c7. Okay, what's the idea? It's a deflection sacrifice. If black takes here, white takes back on d5. That is the idea. However, it turns out that is the best plan for black. For example, you take here, white takes here, and if you calculate one more move into the future, queen takes f4 is the key idea. You hit the king, and from here, black has excellent drawing chances. For example, if the king goes back, you just insert the check like that, and overall, black should be just fine. So, that was the key idea. Instead, Gukesh, he chokes, he blunders, whatever you want to call it. He makes a terrible move here. No offense to Gukesh, the guy's the world champion. We all make mistakes in time pressure. It happens. But he makes a big mistake. There's just no other way to say it. He had an even game. He had the game saved. And here he plays d1, promoting to a queen. Now, this is the move almost anyone would play with 12 seconds here. I mean, what could be better than promoting to a queen like this and literally getting two queens on the board? Well, the problem with this is bishop takes d8, the king takes, and then knight to c3. And here, black has no checks. There's no, I mean, you have these two checks, but they're no good, obviously. There are no good checks. The fork hits these two pieces. You have to move the queen, but then white takes on d5, wins back the queen, and he finishes with an extra knight. For example, I don't know, queen to d2, queen takes, knight takes, and white's just going to have the extra knight in the endgame, and he wins the game. Like easy peasy lemon squeezy. And beyond that, let's go back to this position after bishop takes. If you take with the rook here, like this, I mean, you can't because the king's under check. So you just lose the game. So again, this position, he goes d1, promotes to a queen. The key move was queen takes c7. That would have saved the game. And instead, Gukesh loses a heartbreaking game in the ultimate round, round 10 of the 2025 Norway Chess Tournament to Fabiano Caruana. Of course, Fabiano is one of the best players in the world. He's been in the top 5 since like forever. So very understandable, but very impressive game by both players. All right, Chess YouTube, hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, do me a huge favor. First of all, smash that like button. It helps me out a ton. It really, really does. Helps the video reach way more people. If you enjoyed this video, if you made it this far, just hit that like button. It makes a world of difference for me. And comment down below. What do you think of the game? What do you think of this epic match between Gukesh and Fabiano Caruana? Just comment down below. And as always, I wish you the best of luck in your chess improvement journey in 2025 and beyond. And I'll see you in the next video.